Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the most important recording projects ever. And now I'm going to do one. Oh, this is going to turn over some toadstools. Let's put it that way. Lots of people mentioned it. Of course, it has to be in here in the pile. It's the Arthur Schnabel Beethoven Piano Sonata Cycle. This is the Warner version of it. But more appropriately, it's the Arthur Schnabel playing Beethoven back in the early days, not his later versions when he was really not in very good shape pianistically. These are on Pearl. These were generally considered to be the best sounding remasterings. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, I think, CDs here. I have them. I listen to them. They're quite wonderful. But I have to say, reading the comments, the comments are wonderful. They tell us so much about not only how wonderful so many of you are, but how horrible some of you are, and how screwed up our culture is when it comes to this music, because these historical recordings, oh, they bring out the arrogant boobies amongst us. They really, really do. People get neurotic about old dead artists and particularly historical recordings, and they make issues about how only some sort of utter Philistine can't hear through the snap, crackle, and pop of the horrible acetate disc surfaces to get to the unbounded, transmogrified spirituality of the essential magnificence. Oh, it's such a bullshit fest. It really is. It's extraordinary. And it's particularly bad when it comes to Schnabel's Beethoven, because Schnabel's Beethoven is great Beethoven. Let's not kid ourselves. He was a genius pianist, and this was the first complete Beethoven sonata cycle, and that was a big deal. And it is a big deal. It was recorded, let me see. When was it recorded? Historical recordings, 1933 to 35, it looks like, or 38 or 35. I can't see this. 32 to 35. There we go. Which is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. I knew his son. He lived in Danbury, Connecticut, and taught at the Manhattan School. And I used to run into him every so often on the train when I was commuting into New York. And we had lovely conversations about him and his dad and piano music in general. But, they were just, light and enjoyable conversations. I wish I could remember something utterly, devastatingly profound. But no, he was just a really nice guy. And we used to chat. Anyway, the bottom line is this. It's a great piano sonata cycle. But it has so much historical baggage. What is some of the historical baggage? Well, first of all, there's this idea, Schnabel was not the greatest technician. So he's one of those artists, sort of like Maria Callas, where she was a Kunstdiva and he was a Kunstklavierist. He was somebody who he claimed wanted to play music that was better than it could be played. Well, he certainly proved that, didn't he? The occasional missed note, it doesn't make any difference. It really doesn't. Interpretively, he was phenomenal, particularly in the late Beethoven sonatas. I mean, the Hammerklavier and the slow movement, even though he may have struggled a little in the fugue. I've never been much of a fan of his Waldstein. I think his first movement's a little blurry and rhythmically approximate, but, it doesn't matter. The problem with Schnabel is that there have been so many great piano sonata cycles since. I mean, zillions of them. Is he still the best? Is he incomparable? Well, no, he isn't. But that doesn't mean that this is still not one of the most important recording series ever. And one of the other reasons, and this is really a significant thing, it has to do with the way we experience music, especially the classics. Artists like Schnabel and Toscanini, they taught us how great music should be heard, or one way in which great music should be heard. Remember that the piano recital did not exist until Liszt invented it. And Liszt was kind of remarkable in that sense. The Beethoven piano sonatas were not played in concert like they are now. They were played at home. They were meant to be played at home for the most part. Pianists who would do a Beethoven sonata cycle, if you look at concert programs in the 19th century and for much of the first bit of the 20th, I mean, if you read Joseph Szigeti's autobiography about violin playing too, it's the same thing. Big works, sonatas and things, were not performed in concerts. Concerts with featuring an instrumental soloist like a pianist or a violinist had, first and foremost, a singer. And these people were accompanists, especially pianists, keyboard players. They would travel with, someone else, someone who played the tune, the melody people, someone who sang the tune, and they would do an occasional, solo turn. And that solo turn would just as soon be some cheap, trashy bit of virtuosic fluff, or it might be, an improvisation on a theme provided by the audience. I mean, they were circus performers. The idea of a solo piano recital with only major piano works is a very new thing. And like I said, it was invented by Liszt and followed up by his students and his students' students, and also by pianists like Arthur Schnabel. And the first flowering of this initial effort to take the classics as seriously as they deserve to be taken, or at least as we were told they deserve to be taken, you may disagree, was a project like doing the complete Beethoven piano sonatas. And it was a bigger deal on 78s too, because remember, it would be like a big stack and expensive, a serious investment. So, this was, for so many people, for listeners who did not play an instrument, new music, really new music, and the opportunity to experience the compositional growth of a genius like Beethoven in one consistent series of music. And that's why these things are so important. Now, the other aspect of them that was so important in their modern incarnation was the perpetual battle amongst fans of historical recordings, who are a crazy group of people. I know my friend Jim is listening, right, Jim? You can attest to this. They're nuts. They're all kooky. Now, some of them, like my friend Jim, are deliciously kooky and wonderful human beings. A lot of them are really arrogant jerks. And they have this thing about how if it doesn't sound like crap, it's not worth listening to. Or they make all of these issues about whether the sonics are marginally better in one version or another. So one of the things that happened is when these things started coming out on CD, issued by EMI, because everybody hates major labels, one of the things that EMI had was this process called cedar, which we may recall, which was supposed to de-pop and de-click everything and clean up surface noise, which it did. But it also chopped off a lot of the high frequencies and made the sound sort of boxy and unpleasant. These were actually quite good recordings in their day, in the 1930s. And you can hear that on these Pearl remasterings, which were done by who was it? It was Seth Winter and let me see, make sure I get this right, because otherwise I'm going to get screamed at by everybody. Where are they? I know they're here. And since I know them, yes, produced and transferred by Seth Winter. I got it. Yay! And I think, was it Andy Evans or one of those guys who was also involved in it? I mean, these were people who were, historical recording wackos. And they were very, very dedicated and careful, like Ward Marston and other people who make beautiful historical transfers. And they know, first of all, they found the best sources that they could get their hands on. And second of all, they made sure that it's better to have a little surface noise and a little snap, crackle, and pop, but to hear the instrument. Because when you do that, you realize these were studio recordings. They were done under controlled conditions, and the piano sounds really good for the most part. And they have dynamic range. And I remember reading an article comparing these Pearl things to the one of the earlier versions of the EMI set, because they've been, they've popped up a zillion times. And discovering that you could actually hear notes that were covered up in the remastering process, depending, again, whether the sources that they were used, whether they came from someone's record collection that had been played and they were worn down. You could actually hear more detail in what Schnabel was actually doing, thanks to the Pearl people, than you could on the major label version, all of which led to, fed the general paranoia about major labels, that they can do nothing right, that they're just cheap and mercenary, that everything who works there is stupid. I mean, it's all not true. It's all not true. The major labels have housed, at one point or another, wonderfully devoted people who are absolutely dedicated to the music and to treating it with the love and care that it deserves, given what they have to work with. So, yeah, actually, these sound rather good. But if you compare them to the Pearl, this now Warner, to the Pearl, you will hear, for example, that the sound is a little bit more muffled, a little bit. They've tried to boost it in some ways to compensate for the noise reduction, but that always results in a certain artificiality in the overall sonic image. And what you lose most damagingly, I think, is the sense of the room acoustic in which the instrument is actually being played, because it's that sense of space, the sense of a performer in a room, even if the sound is a little bit degraded or a little bit iffy, that really contributes to the feeling of life, of freshness of the performances. So, I mean, I like these Pearl versions, I really do, but these are good too. And the point is, the real point is that most Beethoven sonata collections, if you're serious about them, are going to have to confront Arthur Schnabel for his historical importance, as well as for his interpretive insights, for his gorgeous handling of most of the slow movements, for his impulsiveness, his wonderful sense of spontaneity, of discovery as he takes us through these sonatas. That's a special quality, and it's one that he projected particularly well. And so, this is without a doubt one of the most important, recording projects ever, for sure. But we don't have to be obnoxious about it. We really don't, or snide, or arrogant, or pompous, or any of those things. It's just there for us to enjoy. And those who need good sonics and who don't want to deal with the historical scratchy, fluffy stuff, that's okay, because there's tons and tons of great Beethoven out there, for sure. So it's up to you to make your choice, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.